one of the concerns that I have is that I don't want to be a talking head. I don't want to just be up here philosophizing or pontificating about reality and about these teachings and practices, because that may or may not be useful or relevant to you, because if you understand what this is all about, what's useful and relevant to you is related to you and your unique process, where you're at, what you make of these teachings, what you make of these practices, how that is applied, how you're applying that to your existence, to your life. One of my friends that I email back and forth with, one of the things he said to me in a recent email was, he said, well, do you know where your students are in terms of whether they're getting the value, whether they're getting the message, whether they understand the invitation, whether they're able to utilize what is being said here? Are you aware of where your students are? Have any of your students experienced enlightenment, right? Have any of your students experienced a significant or profound difference in the quality of their life by virtue of having these understandings or by virtue of doing these practices? And my response to that question is, I can't say that I know with certainty. I know that certain people have spoken to me and said that these teachings and practices have made a difference, but I can't say for sure whether I understand what the case is for everybody. And so in order to have this class work within a specific period of time, I really need to hear more from you in terms of, as best as you can, to express where you're at in regard to this. See, because the reality of it is, for each of you, there is a where you're at in regard to this, isn't there? Right. Yeah, for each of you, there is a where you're at in regard to this. And if I was a medical doctor, right, and I was treating you, I would need to have as much information as I could about you to know what to do, to know how to treat you, right? And the same thing is true here. The only difference is a medical doctor can have an MRI, he can have a CAT scan, it can have x-rays, it can have blood work done, he can do all kinds of things, right? No, but here I have to depend on you telling me, because what we're dealing with here is not tangible. What we're dealing here is not physical. And part of a process for everyone involved in this process, part of the process is to have a realistic assessment of where you're at, to have some sense of where you're at. You know what I mean? I mean, that can range from everywhere from being completely lost to having ideas about this that are really not true, but they're your own misunderstandings, your own conclusions, conceptual conclusions about this that are really not accurate, but unless we talk about that, that's not going to come to light, right? Or on the other side of it, it may be the case that you actually have experienced some kind of enlightenment, whether it was temporary or whether you understand it to be a consistent experience of where things stand. And the reason I'm saying everything I'm saying is it leaves people in this place where you're concerned about being honest about where you are, right? Because it's almost as if the presumption is that you're dysfunctional. It's almost as if the presumption is that there's something wrong with you, right? And therefore, for you to admit where you really are in terms of what you understand or what it's like to be you, what your life is like, how you feel, what your emotions are all about, and so forth, is a scary proposition, because you're admitting that you're defective, that you're not okay, that something's wrong with you, which is just not true. It's just not true. So I encourage you, in this class, I encourage you to really take a serious look at where you see yourself, How happy are you? How functional are you? How stressed are you? How much of the time do you experience being upset? How much of the time do you experience struggling or coping with life? This is an important thing to pay attention to and find out what the truth is for yourself. So you don't just go around living in some, mental state or on some trip about life that's just not useful and not accurate. And if you have that information, then you can ask specific questions. And that would make things a lot more workable here, right? For you to email me questions so that I have specific questions, or here. See, if you email me questions, then you don't have to identify yourself for the class. You can say, I would prefer not to be identified, and then I won't identify who you are. Right? Or even here, to ask specific questions about what you hear me saying or what you understand these practices to be, and where you're at in relationship to this whole thing. Because until and unless that's clear, and until and unless you're actually working with that information to deal with that information, to be able to be more effective in experiencing well-being and happiness, without that, this is just a academic class, isn't it? Without that, you're just learning about stuff here it's interesting information, but it's not going to make a difference in your life. You have to get personally involved in order for it to make a difference in your life. You have to really start paying attention to what is it like to be you. How is if you take everything that's being presented here, whether we're talking about the teachings or the practices, and you match it up to your life, how does it match up? Where are you at? Where are you at? Are you happier than you were because of what you have come to understand? Are you able to apply this in your life, in your everyday life, in a way that starts to eliminate a lot of the unnecessary suffering that goes on? That's what really matters more than anything else. Otherwise, this is just a philosophical conversation. This is just an academic conversation. One of the things, I'll be with you in a second. One of the things that I've noticed in class is that people ask questions or make comments as if this is information that I'm presenting, or it's a particular philosophy or a particular viewpoint that I'm presenting, and it's being interacted with about, well, what about this and what about that? How does this apply to this? But you see, that's all dealing with it academically. That's all dealing with it in terms of, what you think about it, how it compares to what you know, and so forth and so on, right? But that's not really going to get the job done here. How well versed you are in this information is not going to change anything. You can be an expert in a particular subject, and there are a lot of experts in psychology and philosophy, aren't there? Right? And I can tell you from my personal experience that most of those so-called experts are crazier than most other people. So what the hell good has that information done them when they haven't? Most of the people that I know that went through training to be a psychologist never really looked at their own life with any realistic analysis and asked themselves, how healthy am I psychologically? A lot of people get degrees in psychology so they don't have to ever allow that to get seen, because they can hide behind the degree now and say, oh, well, I'm the expert and you're not. And then what you want to do is you want to look and see, okay, if I haven't fulfilled the full potential that I have as a human being, because one of the things that is being said here is the full potential you have as a human being is to be enlightened. That's one of the things that's being said here. The full potential you have as a human being is to be enlightened. So if you haven't fulfilled that, where are you at in relationship to that? Because this method is called the direct method, right? It's called the direct method. In other words, it's saying, let's get right to Let's get right to where you're at in relationship to being enlightened. Let's get right to where you're at about it. Talking to them about understanding what's possible and understanding that there's nothing wrong with wanting to feel good. You know, that in this country, there has become this thing that those people who are pursuing happiness by using drugs are wrong and bad and dysfunctional and criminal. Point here to ask you to please look and see where you really are and see if you'd be willing to share that so that I can speak to that. You know what I mean? So I can talk to you about that and help you maybe to get to a place that you wouldn't be able to get to without dealing with those details. That makes sense, yes? Okay, see you next time.